The arena in Chelyabinsk didn't just hum, it vibrated. Beneath the heavy lights and echoing chants, a quiet storm was building. This wasn't just another fight on the card, this was a collision of ambition and identity. On one side stood Andrey Stotsky, the hometown craftsman, a fighter forged in the deep, relentless system of Russian boxing. On the other, emerging from Tashkent with fire in his chest, was Madiyar Saydrakhimov, a man still carving his professional path, but already hardened by the sting of missed Olympic destiny. The crowd roared as Stotsky's name echoed through the arena, their voices carrying expectation, pride, and pressure all at once. He wasn't just fighting an opponent, he was carrying a city on his shoulders. But across the ring, Saydrakhimov walked with a different energy, quiet, focused, calculated, a silver medalist from the Asian Championships, a man who had once been pushed aside by a rising Olympic champion, now standing here with something to prove. The lights dimmed, the music pulsed, and the fighters stepped closer. This wasn't just about records, it was about redemption, about proving who belongs on this stage. And as the referee called them to the center, gloves raised and eyes locked, you could feel it. Something real was about to unfold. No theatrics, no illusions, just two fighters, and one unforgiving truth waiting to be revealed. From the opening bell, there was no hesitation, only intent. Stotsky, upright and composed, began with a rhythm that felt almost deceptive. His hands low, his stance relaxed, he looked like a man inviting danger rather than avoiding it. But beneath that calm exterior was precision. Every movement had purpose. Every inch of distance was measured. Saydrakhimov, the naturally bigger man, immediately tried to impose himself, stepping forward with that probing right hand, testing the waters. But Stotsky wasn't there to be found easily. He slid back just enough, slipping punches by fractions, then firing back with sharp, compact combinations that barely traveled, but always landed. It was surgical, efficient, and for a moment, it puzzled the Uzbek fighter. The crowd reacted to every clean shot, their energy rising as their hometown fighter began to find his groove. Saydrakhimov, however, wasn't reckless. He adjusted, digging to the body, trying to slow the movement, trying to plant his feet in the fight. But Stotsky's timing was already becoming a problem. He wasn't throwing much, but what he did throw mattered. A short right hand here, a snapping jab there, just enough to disrupt rhythm, just enough to score. The first round didn't explode, it simmered. A feeling out process, yes, but beneath it, tension was building. Because both men were beginning to understand something crucial, this wasn't going to be easy. As the fight edged into the second round, the tempo began to sharpen, and with it, the stakes. Saydrakhimov pressed forward with more urgency now, his confidence growing as he started to close the distance. But Stotsky remained elusive, almost frustratingly so. He stood tall, almost inviting shots, his guard loose, his chin seemingly exposed, a dangerous game that demanded absolute trust in reflexes and timing. And for a while, it worked beautifully. He would lean just out of range, let Saydrakhimov commit, and then punish him on the way in. A crisp 1-2, a short counter, nothing flashy but effective. The crowd sensed it too, reacting with every clean connection. But there was a risk in Stotsky's style. That low lead hand, that open stance, it was a ticking clock. Because every time Saydrakhimov missed, he was learning, measuring, adjusting. And slowly, he began to find moments, small windows where his punches started to get closer. A right hand brushed past the guard, another thudded into the body. Not clean, not yet, but closer. The fight was still balanced, but you could feel a shift beginning to form. The Uzbek fighter wasn't being discouraged anymore. He was adapting. And in fights like this, adaptation can be the difference between control and collapse. By the third round, the atmosphere had changed. The polite chess match of the early rounds gave way to something more urgent, more physical. Saydrakhimov began to assert himself, not just with punches, but with presence. He stepped in harder, leaned his weight onto Stotsky, and started to test him in ways that went beyond pure technique. And then it came, the first real statement. A straight right hand, fired clean down the center, snapping Stotsky's head back and sending a ripple through the arena. For the first time, the hometown fighter looked shaken. Not broken, but shaken. He clinched briefly, trying to gather himself, trying to reset, but Saydrakhimov had felt it. He knew now that the door was open. The punches came heavier, sharper, more committed. And while Stotsky still fired back, still found moments with his counters, the momentum had shifted. Blood began to appear, first subtly, then more noticeably, a cut forming, a sign of damage. The crowd, once roaring with confidence, now watched with tension creeping in, because this wasn't the same fight anymore. This was no longer about finesse, it was about survival. And Saydrakhimov, once the cautious challenger, was now stepping into the role of aggressor, with growing belief. The middle rounds became a test of will, and in that crucible, both fighters revealed their true nature. Stotsky, despite the damage, refused to retreat into safety. He continued to stand his ground, still throwing those short, accurate combinations, still trusting the same style that had carried him early. But the cost was rising. His movement slowed, the bounce in his step faded, and his mouth hung open more often now, a subtle but telling sign of fatigue, or worse. Saydrakhimov, sensing the shift, doubled down on his strategy. That right hand, once a probing weapon, became his signature. He began to time it perfectly, firing it straight through the guard, again and again. Not wild, not desperate, just precise, efficient, and damaging. The sound of leather on bone echoed differently now, heavier, more decisive. Stotsky absorbed it all, showing heart, showing resilience, but each shot left a mark. The cut worsened, blood flowed more freely, and the referee's eyes lingered longer with each exchange. Still, Stotsky fought on. He answered back. He refused to fold. But in fights like this, courage alone isn't always enough. And as the rounds ticked away, the question became unavoidable. How much more could he take? By the fifth round, the fight had tilted firmly in Saydrakimov's favor. What had once been a tactical battle was now a hunt. Stotsky, brave but visibly worn, struggled to maintain the rhythm that had defined his early success. His reaction slowed just enough, his timing slipped just slightly. And against a fighter like Saydrakhimov, that was all it took. The Uzbek pressed forward relentlessly, his right hand now a constant threat. Straight, sharp, and unforgiving. He no longer chased wildly, he stalked, measured, waited, and when the openings came, he took them. Clean shots landed. Heavy shots, the kind that don't just score points, but change fights. Stotsky tried to respond, tried to rally, but his punches lacked the same snap, the same authority. The crowd urged him on, their voices rising in desperate support. But the tide had turned. And then came the damage. A deep, ugly cut opened near the eye. Blood pouring down, blurring vision, turning every second into a battle against both opponent and circumstance. The ringside doctor watched closely, the referee stayed near, because now it wasn't just about winning. It was about safety. And still Stotsky refused to quit. The final round arrived not with anticipation but with urgency. 3 minutes stood between survival and collapse. Stotsky stepped forward knowing he needed something dramatic. Something decisive. But Saydrakhimov had other plans. He came out composed, focused, and ready to finish what he had started. The right hand found its mark almost immediately. Clean, precise, and devastating. Stotsky staggered. His legs betrayed him for the first time all night. He tried to clinch, tried to hold on, but the damage was done. Another right hand followed, then another, each one chipping away at what remained. The referee watched closely, giving every chance, but the signs were clear. A final, crushing right hand sent Stotsky down, his body hitting the canvas as the arena fell into stunned silence. He rose, bravely, but unsteady. The fight resumed, but only briefly, because Saydrakhimov didn't hesitate. He closed the distance, landed again, and forced the referee's hand. The stoppage came swiftly, and rightly so. It was over. As the dust settled, Madiyar Saydrakhimov stood victorious, not just as the winner of the fight, but as a man who had proven something deeper. He had faced adversity, solved the puzzle, and executed with precision, when it mattered most. It hadn't been easy. The early rounds tested him, frustrated him, forced him to adapt. But once he found his rhythm, once he trusted that straight right hand, he became unstoppable. For Andrey Stotsky, defeat came not from lack of effort, but from the unforgiving nature of the sport. He had shown skill, heart, courage, but his style, as entertaining as it was, left openings, and at this level, openings are punished. The crowd, though disappointed, recognized the effort, applauding both men for a battle that delivered everything it promised. In the end, it was a fight defined by adjustment, by resilience, and by the power of one perfectly executed punch. Because in boxing, sometimes all it takes is one shot to change everything.